No, man, I'm going to take free. Somebody ma gene ko ma joko guy. They're saying what? No.
Just introduce yourself and pass it on.
Good afternoon, viewers. I am Tijan Jau, and I'm here on a serious note. We are live. Introduce yourself.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. 1, 2, hello. Hello.
Definitely introduction. Okay.
Yes, hello. Okay, guys, thank you all for coming back on time. So we are about to do. There's no way. And I'm not even it. Guys, we are about to do the round table introduction. So all you need to do is tell us who you are, the institution that you are representing, and probably what will be your expectation, for this 2 days table experience. Let's start with the introduction and then go around and around and around. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Edward Francis Dalia. I am here representing Askambi Media. And my expectation is to learn as much as possible when it comes to the TRRC, most especially the implementation plan, how the government is doing, and what are the things that are the challenges, and what is hindering us not to achieve those things. For the chair highlighted something that captivates me, which is the Reparation Commission. I want to know more about it.
So it goes with this? Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I am Lamin Sanyang, a legal practitioner by profession, one of the facilitators. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Aissatou Jawara, and I am representing Aniket.
Good morning. I am Fatmata Sane. I am representing the Solo Sandem Foundation.
I am the Amimboop of GRTS. I'm representing GRTS. Hope it's going to be a very good session. I am the Amimboop representing GRTS. Hope we'll have a very good session here. That's what I'm expecting anyway.
Good morning. My name is Ndei. Good morning. I am Ndei Sise, representing the Post TRC MOJ. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Bridget Correa from Tango. My expectation is to gain a deeper knowledge about the AUTJ policy, and particularly in the Gambia's transitional justice process.
Good morning. I am Aissatou Diallo, Programs Officer at Think Young Women. My expectations is to widen my understandings about transitional justice, especially with the framework of the African Union. Thank you.
My name is Khadija Jallow, representative of Hidden Healthcare, the Gambia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Khadija Tujasi, a representative of Wave Gambia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mariama Fatajo, and I am representing Wave Gambia, Women's Association for Women and Victims Empowerment.
Good morning, everyone. I am Hussein Usao from Bekanya. So my expectation for this training is to know the progress of the transitional justice process in the Gambia. Thank you all.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Binta Kanjai from Center for Research and Policy Development.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mariama Marom from Foria newspaper. My expectation is to know more about the transitional justice system, please, and also what will be the reparation plan for the victims.
My name is Ellison Levison, and I'm from the Post TRRC.
Listen. I am Paul Stephen Preda, Gambia Press Union.
I am Kemo Kanyi from the Voice newspaper.
Good morning. I am Ibrahim Mbaye from the Alkamba Times.
Good morning. I am Fatou Jaju representing Fantanka. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Aissatou Eba from Will.
And your expectations?
Okay, good morning. I am Aissatou Eba from Will.
Hey, you're distracting us.
Expecting to know more about the AU on transitional justice, especially in the Gambian framework.
Good afternoon. My name is Tijan Jau. I'm here on behalf of Team Gumsa Bopa. And my expectations are, Mr. Jom, I'm talking about my expectations. So I'm expecting that we are all going to be very, very informed about the AUTJP, and of course we'll know the level of implementation when it comes to the government white paper.
My name is Jane Gomez. I work as the communication specialist for the Gambia Center for Victims of Human Rights Violations. We are happy to have you all here, and I hope that your expectations will be met within these 2 days of the training on AUTJP and the government white paper. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lamin C, program officer at the Victim Center, and as well, I'm also the project focal person for this project. So my expectations are for us to be well informed about the AUTJP and the government white paper, and the plans, the status plan for the GWP, the government white paper, and the AUTJP. So I'm looking forward to a very, very fruitful and a good discussion when it comes to this workshop, together with our wonderful facilitators in names of Mr. Lavin Jai and then Mr. Imran. Hey, Mr. Sorry for Mr. Lavin, sorry. Mr. Lavin Sanyang and Imran. All right, thank you guys.
Abdumane is also coming.
Yes, Abdumane as well will be on his way as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Keba Jom. I'm the National Coordinator at the Victim Center. My main expectation is by the end of tomorrow, you will all be equipped enough to transmit messages about the AUTJP at your various institutions as well as beyond. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Paus Manjai. I am the Victim Center driver. Good morning, everybody. My name is Paus Manjai. I am the driver of the Victim Center. At the same time, I am a victim, April 14, 2016. All right, thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you guys for that wonderful discussion. So, on the next agenda, we will start on the core activities on the program guys. Mr. Imran, the floor is yours. All right,
good morning, everyone. My name is Imran. I am a lawyer. Transitional justice is my focus area of work and human rights advocacy. Of course, my expectation is that at the end of this workshop, we all get to understand the African Union's transitional justice policy, and we are able to think about how we can apply it to analyze and to move our transitional justice forward. Because it is a tool, it's a policy guide that is supposed to help us in terms of what we ask for in transitional justice, but how also, because we are all somehow involved in Gambia's transitional justice, we also have to understand how we can use it to help us push in every area that we work in for our transitional justice to be successful, right? I've been involved in transitional justice in different perspectives, from the Truth Commission to the state, to civil society, to INGOs. So I'll try to incorporate some of those experiences in the discussion, right? But how many of you are familiar about what transitional justice is? I know some of you work in transitional justice, but not all of you. So who is not familiar about what transitional justice is? So if I ask, Auntie, transitional justice, what is it? You don't know. Anybody can help explain what transitional justice is? No? Yeah?
Transitional justice, in simple terms, the definition is just the formal and informal, and in this case now, the traditional ways to remedy past human rights violations.
Yes, absolutely. So transitional justice is basically different mechanisms, tools used to address situations where you are moving away from a conflict situation like a war, civil war, genocide, anything of that sort. Or if you are moving from a dictatorship, because Gambia, we never had a war or anything like that, but if you're also moving from a bad governance system, trying to rebuild your institutions so that you have a better democracy, then that also, in a lot of cases, different countries have used different methods to deal with crises of different types, political, sometimes coup d'etats, military issues, and all of that. So they have tried different methods of dealing with that. Sometimes they do electoral reform, sometimes they do security sector reform, sometimes they redraft their constitution, but it has not helped. So now they are in the process of using transitional justice, because transitional justice combines different methods, and so they feel, or well, they've been advised also, but they also realize that if they want to fix the problem, they need to use a system that has more parts. So transitional justice does that. I hope that is understood, right? So that was just to give a kind of a brief background. But now we go into this discussion that we have. How long do I have, by the way? I didn't check your agenda.
Just started, don't worry.
No, but I want to know how much. I can talk all day, you know. Okay. 1.5 hours. Okay. All right. So, where is this thing? Okay. So, like I'm saying, just to introduce this presentation that I'm going to make. It's a presentation that provides an overview of the transitional justice. First of all, I will start with introducing what transitional justice and how it came about on the continent, right? Its origins, evolution, and how it is applied in the modern sense, right? It has changed over the last 30 years. So the first Truth Commission, or the first formal transitional justice process that of the modern time, is the South Africa one, which happened in 1996, right? So over the last 30 years, things have changed slowly up to the point where we developed the transitional justice policy. So I will start the presentation discussing TJ and how it came about in Africa, where it came from and all of that, and how it has changed over the years. Then I will talk about the AUTJP itself, the African Union's transitional justice policy, which has really changed kind of the way we look at transitional justice, right? And its purpose, like I am saying over there, is to address three different things: to address conflict, to address injustice, and to address repression, right? So in terms of conflict, of course, there are a lot of countries in Africa that have had conflicts. Sierra Leone is one of them, DRC at the moment, Ethiopia. But then you also have countries where there was injustice, but you wouldn't call it conflict, which was some places like the Gambia, Tunisia. Those kinds of countries also have had those kinds of repression. Is always part of both conflict and injustice. Is that clear? Yes. If you want me to clarify, or if you have a question, and that is one thing I will plead with you. Generally, what I find with Gambian audiences when you do training is, even when they don't understand something or they don't agree with you, they just keep quiet and let it go. And I really don't like that. If you have something you want me to clarify, let me know and I'll try to clarify it as much as possible. If you have something you disagree with, same thing, rectifications or anything, let me know, right? And at the end, then we will explore the policy's goals. Why is it there? What is its foundational values? Where is it coming from? Why do we decide to have our own transitional justice policy in Africa? How does it connect with other African Union policies? So this is basically the outline of the presentation, right? So Africa has a history of different things: slavery, colonialism, apartheid, dictatorship, and systemic human rights violations, right? And these legacies have left a social and economic inequalities that continue to fuel conflict in the continent, and that is what transitional justice is trying to address, right? So Africa started, well, not even started, I know we started suffering a long time ago, but slavery is one of the earliest kind of subjugations or what do I call it? Repressions, right? Violations that Africa suffered, right? Millions and millions of Africans were picked up, bought from the continent, taken to develop other parts of the world as slaves, right? And that has impacts, and we will maybe talk about them a little bit later, right? When you look at it also, we have had histories of colonialism. I guess it's only one country in Africa on the continent that was not colonized formally, right? Which is Ethiopia, right? So the rest of the continent were all colonies at some point. And here we are. If I was in Dakar last week, anywhere I go, I get stopped, I get harassed. We speak the same language, we have the same culture, we have everything. The only difference that we have is they have a French system, we have an English system, and because of that, we have created divisions amongst ourselves, right? And this has created a lot of conflicts in Africa. You go to the North Africa, you will find that Tunisia and Morocco, for example, are fighting over some piece of land. Somalia is struggling with a piece of land that is trying to be independent. Ethiopia, within themselves, they're fighting. All of these things have something to do with how the colonial system worked in Africa, right? Yes. Apartheid, South Africa. I'm sure all of you know that. Who doesn't know about apartheid in South Africa? Right? So again, a system where white in South Africa had basically it's a separate system, right? All the best things for whites, the rest, bottom of the barrel for blacks, right? And so that was also a system of repression that really, because South Africa is one of the biggest countries, right? And it had an impact across the continent as well. Dictatorships, those are still available and very common. Systemic human rights violations, I think almost every African country has a problem with that, right? So all of these problems are the historical ones like slavery, even though they don't exist anymore, colonialism, but their impacts are still with us and they still affect how some of these conflicts and some of these violations that go on now. So this is what transitional justice is trying to address. Like I said, the first transitional justice process that you would say formally as a transitional justice as we understand it now started in South Africa in 1996, and that was after Nelson Mandela was released from prison, and the country decided that there is a lot of division and we need to find a way to move forward, right? And just taking people to court and all of that will not fix it. So they needed a reconciliation, they needed peace, they needed to know what happened throughout the apartheid period. And so they set up a Truth Commission, the TRC, in 1996, and that was the first Truth Commission that we had on the continent. But transitional justice, basically, they will tell you that it started after the Second World War, right? But it was mostly Western kind of idea at that point, where it was just courts, trials, right? So Nuremberg trials, the Nazis were those that were captured, taken to court, tried, some executed, some sent to jail and all of that, right? So that's the origins of it, and then other countries started to do similar Cambodia, and some of these other countries in other continents. But in Africa, South Africa became the first that actually took this formal approach of doing a truth commission and other aspects, including prosecution. After that, we had also Rwanda. Rwanda also had a different situation. So South Africa had apartheid, right? And they used transitional justice to address it. Rwanda had a genocide. Who doesn't know about the genocide in Rwanda? Everybody knows about it, right? So they also had to do a transitional justice process. Now they had to do, they did a different thing from South Africa, because they had an international court and then they had their own local courts as well. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Sierra Leone also had a civil war. So totally different. All these three countries are different, right? So you have apartheid, you had genocide, and then you had a civil war. And if you look at Gambia, we had what? A dictatorship. So all these countries decided to use transitional justice. But if you are going to address apartheid, it's going to be a little bit different from if you are going to address genocide, right? And that is going to be different from addressing civil war. Same way, it's also going to be different from addressing dictatorship, right? So over those years, so this, what's it called? South Africa started in 1996. Sierra Leone wasn't very far off. And you have Rwanda that was also around the same period. But Rwanda's court, the ICTR, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, was the first one that was set up, right? That was in the late 90s, around 96, 97, 98, around that point, right? If I remember right. But after a few years, so in 2001, they decided to set up their own local courts also to deal with the situation, because the international court alone was not able to deal with it, right? And like I said, Sierra Leone was around the same time. Uganda had, Tunisia had, more recently, that is around 2010, 2011, 2012. Okay. If you look at the way things change, so South Africa did their truth commission. It was only a truth commission. And at the end of it, they gave reparations. And then they were supposed to also do prosecutions. So three different things, right? But it was all a formal system that was set up by the state, right? Rwanda came. Rwanda introduced an international component. So the tribunal for Rwanda, that brought in international courts as part of transitional justice. But they also realized at some point that the international court alone could not address the situation. Now they introduced their own local courts, their court system. But that also was not going to be able to deal with all the cases that they had, right? So they again introduced their local kind of traditional courts called the Gacaca courts to address these things. Now the Gacaca courts were community-based, right? So in each community, they can set up the courts and try people based on that situation, that community, right? And they tried almost 2 million cases, right? These Gacaca courts. So you can find then that Rwanda introduced international law into the transitional justice system, and they also introduced local traditional courts, right? Sierra Leone, they also introduced an international court, so the Special Court of Sierra Leone, it was called, and they also introduced their Truth Commission. So they still maintain the ones that like the South Africans did. But for them, they also introduced another new thing, which is the reconciliation. They created something called Fambul Talk, right? Fambul Talk is that, and I spoke to the guy who started it, and what he said was that when their Truth Commission finished, he was watching the news at some point, international news, and they were saying that Sierra Leone has dealt with the past and they have moved on, they have reconciled. But he lives in the communities and he realizes that that is not true, right? The communities are still not reconciled, people are still angry, they don't know what's going on. And so he decided that, look, if we want real reconciliation, we are going to have to do it in the communities. So they started this mobilization of bringing the communities together and just not even depending on international donors like we do. So what they did was invite the communities. If you have a cup of rice, you bring it. Somebody has a fish, bring it. Somebody has onions, bring it. They combine that, they cook it, they go to some beach or somewhere, and they gather, both perpetrators and the victims, and everybody explains their experience, right? And so what that helped them to do was, for example, in the formal reconciliation, it's like what Gambia did. You saw at the TRRC, right, when people were brought to shake hands and say, I'm sorry, and that was it, right? But that didn't work. So what they did was, these people, and they honestly explained, why did you burn down my house, right? And this person will say, okay, last time before the war, I came to your house to ask for this, you refused. So I was angry at you. So when the war started, I attacked your house, right? So they started to understand these grievances that they were built inside them. And they were able to, once they talked about it, find a way to reconcile, right? And so that is also a new introduction. Then, in 2011, you know the Arab Spring. Who doesn't know about the Arab Spring? Who doesn't know about the Arab Spring? Yes. Again, who will help me explain what the Arab Spring was? Yes.
Was it Egypt?
Tunisia. Yes.
And it spread.
Yes. So there was a guy who was really frustrated with the system in Tunisia around 2011. Frustrated, and he was in protest. He set himself on fire and he died out of that, right? But because he did that, you see, we have this gala thing that is happening now, and the sad thing is usually that governments tend to ignore some of these things when they start, and they should not. So in that case, this guy was so frustrated, he set himself on fire as a way of protest, and he died, right? But the society realized that what he was fighting for, they were also angry, and they were sitting back. And then the youths and everybody started to come out and protest, right? And so streets everywhere protest. And it started with Tunisia, but the other countries around them also saw that, and their youths also started to come out. So you had Egypt and some of the other countries also came out and started protesting. So they were forced to do transitional justice in Tunisia. But this is a new system now where these people were not complaining about just human rights violations like torture or sending somebody to prison. They were complaining about marginalization, poverty, right? The economic situation of the country. So structural problems, things that are part of the system, but that is treating certain people this way and treating others the other way. That also became a new thing that was part of transitional justice, right? And so this brought the idea of, look, since South Africa in 1996 all the way to 2011 in Tunisia, different things have been happening in transitional justice, right? And each one teaches us a lesson. So why don't we put all of those lessons together and form it into a policy that will guide other countries who are going to do transitional justice, right? So these are all things that I've already talked about. So in the 90s, if you're looking at it from a kind of a timeline, this is what you will find. That during the 1990s, it was mostly legal systems, so truth commissions and courts, right? And then at the end, around the 2000s, Africa began to integrate traditional mechanisms. So like I said, Gacaca courts in Rwanda, Pambultok in Sierra Leone, Matoput in Uganda, those things started to come up. So around the 2011s, like I said, Tunisia and some other places started to look at economic problems, gender issues, and these problems that are generic, not just arresting one individual and sending them to jail. So that is how things have changed slowly over the years in transitional justice in Africa. So because of that, they decided, okay, why don't we take all the lessons from these different countries and combine them together and form a policy that will now guide other countries that are going to do transitional justice. Because they realized that South Africa did some things good, But they had a lot of salary well paid in South Africa. People who committed violations were not held accountable, so they didn't start trials until very, very recently, right? So those lessons we needed to incorporate. But they also saw Rwanda, and they saw the fact that, you know, the international court alone was not able to, so legal systems alone cannot fix the problem. You needed the traditional courts to also bring communities as part of the process. So they decided, okay, let's take that lesson as well. The same thing with Sierra Leone, the reconciliation part, traditional mechanism. Let's incorporate that. All of that still will not fix the problem. Let's look at Tunisia. Tunisia, they introduced the issues of gender. Women were marginalized and abused. Youths were also marginalized. Certain groups were marginalized. And so let's learn from that. And there are also other countries that I did not mention. So I just use these four as examples to give you the timeline, right? The 90s, 2000s, 2010s. But one of the bigger ones also was Kenya did a transitional justice that was based on political violence. You see, I'm talking here now, and I am hoping that you will go home and do more finding out on these things, right? Because 1 day or 3 days or 2 days trainings cannot give you all the information you need to understand on these things, right? So I'm just giving you background so that a lot of the things I'll say today you'll probably forget tomorrow, but at least you'll remember the countries and the issues and go and find out, and then that helps you remember, right? Because these are also important things. Like I said, the TJ policy was developed from lessons learned from other countries. So you also, if you're going to act as journalists, as civil society actors, you need to also learn the lessons from those situations and use that to do your work as well, right? Now, the AU policy was adopted in 2019 after years of consultation. So it started around 2014, 2015. And the organization I work for, CSVR, was one of the main organizations that also started pushing this idea of let's develop a policy, right? Initially, the African Union was very much opposed to it because our leaders, as usual, don't like things that would hold them accountable. It took a lot of advocacy from organizations in Uganda. The Fambultok actually formed themselves into an organization in Sierra Leone. And all those organizations, Fambultok in Uganda, some of the civil society networks, South Africa as well, they all pushed for this policy to be developed. And so it started around 2014, 2015, all the way to 2019 when it was formalized and adopted by the African Union and the member states of the African Union, right? One of the things that you will find in that the Gambian transitional justice, when you look at it, and that is one of the reasons I think other countries look at us and say, oh, Gambia's transitional justice is a model, is because there was an advisor from the African Union when the TJ process was being developed. And they had access to the draft of this policy, right? So most of the things that the policy talks about, Gambia tried to incorporate in our process. What happens then is that you have a very holistic process. We included gender, we included youth, we included communities, engagements, reconciliation, traditional mechanisms, and we didn't have proper traditional mechanisms, but at least we did taking guru to people to apologize and that sort of thing, right? So all of those were lessons learned from the draft of the AUTJP. Now, the policy, what it is for, it's supposed to be a guiding policy for member states to design their national process, and that is exactly what Gambia did. We used it to guide us to design our TJ process. So we decided we are going to have an all-Gambian commission. We are going to incorporate all the different regions and all the different religions and youth and women and everybody. So if you look at our 11 commissioners, they were a cross-section of different demographics and different backgrounds. That is coming from the advice of the policy. So it was a guide. It also emphasizes that we should not only focus on legal justice, but we have to focus on healing. We have to focus on reconciliation. We have to focus on economic redress and democratic transformation. Let's look at that. In terms of taking people to court, that, like I said, some countries have tried. on the continent. It didn't work out because sometimes as long as the issues that people had that started the fight in the first place is not addressed, then you are still going to have people picking up guns or people committing abuse. So, in the sense of, but I'll come to that later, what I have found with transitional justice, and I keep saying these days, is that when I do a lot of doing this research and writings around transitional justice, and on the continent you find that either people don't have equal access to resources or they don't have equal access to political participation, and because of that, conflicts start, right? So, if you want to fix a problem of a country, you will have to make sure those two things are fixed. Everybody has a chance to participate in the politics of the country. Everybody has an equal opportunity in the economy of the country. Otherwise, what happens is, and you'll find narratives like that in the Gambia, right? When Jammeh came, he labeled the former government thieves and blah, blah, rampant corruption, and they were out, right? And again, I think Jammeh was the main person that brought this issue of tribe into the politics, right? Mandinkas were ruling for this long and they didn't do anything, did it over my dead body, they will never rule the country again, right? He came with that idea. And guess what he did when he came in? Brought his own ethnic group closer to him. That he also abused them, of course. So when I say this, people need to also understand. I'm talking about the political aspect here. Jammeh did that not for the Jola. He did it for himself, right? But what that creates is that the people who are marginalized, okay, there were certain areas that were die-hard opposed to Jammeh, where he would say there's going to be no electricity, no water, no anything, right? And usually that would be a specific ethnic group. So that ethnic group, because they don't have equal access to economic opportunities of the country, they also are going to try to get power, because it's only through power that they are also going to get resources. But when they come in, what tends to happen is that because Jammeh had labeled one group, they also will label Jammeh's group, oh, these people were the problem, right? Now we will block them. They will also never be. You see how conflicts happen in Africa. So you'll find that most of the time is those two things. When somebody has power, it's only their people who will enjoy. And because of that, we fight over power and we fight over resources, right? Land is another big issue. So this policy tries to guide to address those two as the main problem. What did I miss now? Democratic transformation. Okay. Again, it's the same thing, so I will not talk too much on it. So again, it's about power. Because if the democratic transition, all it is trying to do is to make sure that everybody in a country is treated equally, right? And so that is what also the policy is trying to do. Now, it rejects a one-size-fits-all model, and it allows each country to adapt the policy to its own transitional needs and challenges. Again, that was a lesson they learned from the 30 years of transitional justice in Africa, right? Or at least 20 years when this thing was being developed. So they realized that South Africa has apartheid. What they need is different from what Rwanda needs. Rwanda's needs are different from Tunisia. Tunisia is different from Gambia. Gambia is different from Sierra Leone. So they decided that we are going to develop a policy that it's not just going to be that you apply all of it. So the way this transitional justice policy is designed is that if a country is doing TJ, you are just going to look at it and you pick out the things that you think you need. And those are the things that you apply. You don't need to apply the whole policy. It just depends on what you need and you apply that. The AUTP is both a milestone and a tool for future innovations in African TJ processes. So it covers a lot of things. And what it does also is provide benchmarks, which we will talk about, I think, tomorrow or one of these days. Well, today or tomorrow, I can't remember. But it creates benchmarks where if you are doing TJ also, you have to look at those benchmarks, right? And see whether you are actually working according to this or if you are going astray, right? And so that's a way of making or helping countries do TJ properly. But it also has a lot of issues that need to be included that have not been included, right? Right now, we are doing some researches on gender has become a normal thing now in transitional justice, so everybody now includes gender. But technology and how it can help improve transitional justice is one of the studies that they are doing. But also the other issue is, what do you call it again? Corporate accountability. So most of the violations, the wars, and the violations that happen in the country, even if it's dictatorships, is again because of the resources of a country, right? And you find companies from outside Africa who will come and supply you weapons and, you know, create fights so that they can have an opportunity to get cheap oil or cheap diamonds or whatever it is from these countries. And so that is something also that is being now proposed that, for example, in the Gambia, okay, Jammeh was the dictator, he was abusing, but was he not working with certain companies and organizations that also benefited from that? And what we are now saying is that those companies and organizations should also be held accountable for this. So I'll give you an example. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, I'm sure most of you don't remember Laurent Kabila, right? So Kabila was a rebel leader who in the end took over DRC as the president, right? But he had to still keep fighting different rebel groups, right? Who were still trying to remove him from power. But because he was a rebel, when he took over the government, there were a lot of sanctions on him. And so if you want to fight the other rebels, you need weapons. But because you are sanctioned, you cannot get weapons. Now there's this businessman, he's called Dan Gatler. You can look him up on Google or YouTube or wherever. And he's a diamond dealer, right? Israeli diamond dealer. Comes to Congo, and he promises Roland Kabila that if you give me monopoly over your diamond mining, I can give you $20 million cash so that you can buy weapons. Of course, this guy needs the weapons. He agrees. The guy gets, now he's a billionaire. If you check him on Google, you'll find him there. He's a billionaire now because he had monopoly over the diamond mines in DRC, right? So those are now issues where if transitional justice is going to be done, Dan Gatler should be part of transitional justice. And it says that there is an international component, so the UN agencies, international donors, and all of these people, and then the African Union itself has a role because it's the umbrella organization of the African continent. And also then you have the sub-regional organizations like ECOWAS, SADC, IGAD, some of these regional economic communities, right? National system, so the government of every country that is doing transitional justice should be there, and then civil society, lawyers, the media, everybody else also has a role, right? So it organizes each group and what their role should be in transitional justice. Again, the policy is online. You can download it and look at it. It's like 40-something or 50-something pages, not very long. So it's easy to look at whatever you need to look into it. So it all happening again. You have to deal with marginalizations. As long as there are groups who are treated unfairly, they will always try to so that they can also enjoy. So if you want to stop people fighting and fighting again, you need to address marginalizations happening again. Poverty. As long as poor people are there, of course, even in Gambia now, we are saying that there's more crime, people are stealing more, robberies and break-ins. As long as there is poverty, people need to survive. They will justify doing whatever it takes to survive. And that means you cannot have stability. We need to deal with poverty. We need to deal with marginalization. We also need to deal with governance failures. That institution of the state is functioning. But if you make sure that governance is good, right, that also helps you to prevent your military from feeling like they need to take over, right? Like I said, when Jammeh came over in '94, his argument was that the former government was corrupt, the elites were enjoying, their children were going to Europe to study. We don't country, we didn't even have a university, right? So that was his reason. So imagine if the former regime had built universities and allowed higher education. You cannot then complain about that as an issue. If you were making sure that making sure that people could buy bread easily, they could get a job and find food to eat, it is not going to be an issue they can complain about. So as long as you don't address those governance problems, there is always going to be a chance of conflict coming up. So the policy tries to stop that. It also tries to lay the foundation for sustainable peace through inclusive nation building and public trust in institutions. How does it do that? The policy always talks about inclusivity and participation. So we said earlier, transitional justice is a rebuilding process. So you are rebuilding from conflict or you are rebuilding from dictatorship. Now, if you are rebuilding, everybody has to be part of that process. If they don't feel like they were included, they will not trust that system, right? They will feel like, right? You don't feel like a part of that system. And you will always try your best to break down that system. So when it's talking about trying to sustain peace, it does that through inclusive nation building. So whatever you are doing, you need to make sure that all segments of society are included. Men, women, young, old, even the people outside the country, refugees and displaced persons, right? Ensuring accountability by pursuing justice for serious violations of human rights. This is one of the biggest problems that we have. So they also, the policy says that perpetrators should be held accountable for what they did. Sometimes through the legal process, prosecution and send them to jail, but sometimes through other means, right? Amnesties and reconciliation processes, and sometimes even traditional ways of punishment, right? Not send them to jail, not take them to court. But it's a problem, accountability, because a lot of the time, the people who usually start these fights, they always have some sort of power still, right? And it becomes difficult. There are certain countries right now that transitional justice is supposed to happen. It cannot happen because the people who are in charge, in power, are not ready to be held accountable. South Sudan is one of those countries. So in, 2013, they had this conflict. So South Sudan was formed in 2011, right? Yes, and in 2013, they fell into civil war, different groups, again, fighting for power, right? Now, at around 2015, they had a peace agreement, didn't fix the problem. 2018, they revised that agreement again, and they agreed that they are going to have transitional justice to fix the problems, right? So they agreed that they are going to have a truth commission, they are going to have a reparation commission, and they are going to have accountability. So they are going to set up a hybrid court, like the Gambia is saying. Now, their government has 5 vice presidents, because there are different groups. So they have about 64 ethnic groups. In Gambia, we have how many? About 10, 11, that much, if you count the smaller minorities, right? In South Sudan, they have 64 ethnic groups, right? And so because these different groups are all, most of them have their own rebel groups fighting, when they made the peace agreement, they had to set up this government where like everybody has to have a vice president. Can you imagine? So 5 vice presidents, and then the president, all coming from different groups. Nobody trusts each other. And most of them have committed human rights violations during the conflict, right? So when they decided to have these 3 things, truth commission, reparation commission, and accountability commission, court, a hybrid court, those people don't want to go to jail. So they are not going to allow the transitional justice process to come. Because if it comes, they will be called to the courts and they probably are going to go to jail. So they have been frustrating that process ever since, right? And so that makes accountability one of those challenging problems. And I think either myself or Sang will deal with the issue of the elements of the transitional justice policy, which says that you have to sequence your transitional justice. So you have to choose what comes first, what comes second, what comes third. Because if you don't do that, you will not be able to get peace, right? So in Gambia, we had a Truth Commission, and we told the Truth Commission, again, I'm giving you this example because Gambia learned from the TJ policy. So the policy says that you need to plan and think about which one should come first, which one should come second, which one should come third. In Gambia, when we designed our process, we decided accountability cannot come now. We have to leave it for later. So we asked the TRRC to establish the truth, promote reconciliation, grant reparations, and recommend accountability, prosecution. So that was going to come after, right? Because if you want to bring it immediately at that point where, you're just changing, it becomes very, very, very difficult because there are always going to be people who will try to block that. And when they block that, they also block the truth telling, they block reparations, they block everything, right? So we learn from that. And the policy also tries to do that. How much time? Okay. About 5? Okay. Is it? No. It's about, yes. But I'll leave some of that for questions. I'm almost done anyway. Now, I will talk about when you say normative basis, what are the values? What are we basing this idea of a process on, right? And it's based on different things. The African Union's Constitutive Act, that is the act that formed the African Union. So before we had the African Union, we had the OAU, Organization of African Unity, right? I always find it very frustrating because we seem to be copying what Europe does, right? And it's just a change of name. So Europe had their EEA, and they somehow transformed it to the EU, right? 3 letters, 2 letters. Now Africa also, I think at some point decided now we need to also change. So from OAU to AU. Now when they formed the AU, one of the lessons they learned though was this. There are some reasons, some good reasons why they changed. I'm just mocking them now, but there are also some good. So this thing, Article 4H of the African Union's Constitutive Act. You know what they learned from Rwanda? Again, like I said, the policy is always learning, but the AU also had to learn. So they learned from the OAU had this principle of what the Western system has. Respecting sovereignty, right? What does that mean? You don't interfere in the affairs of a country, right? If they have an internal problem, is their problem, let them deal with it, right? They adopted that with the OAU. So when Rwanda happened, these crazy people were sitting there watching a genocide happen, and the law says, African Union says we cannot intervene, we have to respect the principle of sovereignty. Right? So they sat there and waited almost 1 billion people, 800, what was it? So almost 1 million people were killed, 800,000 to 1 million, we're not sure exactly what number. But between 800,000 people to 1 million people were killed within 3 months. And the African Organization of African Unity was right there. How many countries? 50-something countries. And they could not do a thing because they are looking at a piece of paper that is telling them you cannot intervene, right? But at the end of those things, they learned the lessons. Okay, we need to change this. Of course, we are bound by these things. Nowadays, lawyers tell me, we are a common law country. That means that we cannot change the laws that the colonizers gave us. We must follow them because we are a common law country. You see, the reason I'm saying these things is not just to rant and talk about these things here. We have to, when we do work or when we approach certain things, respect human values above what the paper says or what I read in the book right? These things we have to be able to sometimes put aside and think about what is moral for a human being to do, right? Right now, we have a genocide going on again. The world is sitting and watching. Everybody is giving you technical reasons why they should not intervene, right? We as Africans have to stop that, because for us, actually, most of these things that we depend on were designed to restrict us from doing certain things. I will give a more clear example. The Public Order Act, Gambia, Section 5, right? Prevents people from protesting. It was a law that was made in 1963. It was a colonial law. That law did not want black people coming out to protest against the Queen of England. And now we have a Gambian government, Gambian people representing the Gambian people who also adopt the same behavior like the Queen of England, does not want us to come out and say we are not happy with you, right? So it's basically still a colonial system that tells people, sit down in your corner, don't say a thing, we will run the country as we want. And a lot of us, I see even youth, last time we had a dialogue, one of the youth said he was not supporting Gala because they should obey the law. Why? Because it's written there in a piece of paper, right? That mindset is why I'm telling you we need to stop this. The African Organization of African Unions saw a genocide happen. They couldn't do anything because their laws were there saying you cannot intervene. Now, Article 4H and the other article, I can't remember it. Those two articles now says that it is a moral duty for them as the African Union to intervene when they see a genocide happening or about to happen or any mass atrocity. So mass atrocity meaning anytime there is a lot of people that are going to die or suffer from a situation, the African Union now has a duty to step in, right? And the way they will step in, transitional justice is part of that, right? And so that is why the policy is taking from that act, right? The other foundation for this policy is Agenda 2063. This is like our national development plan. It's more of a dream than a reality. I'm being cynical and critical again, but to be honest, that is most of the things that they are dreaming about in this Agenda 2063 is not, we are not going to have it, because the people who came together to draft this are the same people who are making sure that we don't get that. What our national development plan usually promises is a lot of progress and success, and Gambia, like Jammeh's one was what? Vision 2020. Gambia will be the Singapore of Africa, right? Those kinds of dreams, but you don't then do anything that is going to make you achieve that, right? So the African Union also has their own Agenda 2063. So they had this 50-year plan that they are going to stop wars in Africa. Africa is going to be basically like the EU. This is usually, Tuareg are always our role models. Huh? We look up to them and how what they achieve, we want to achieve. But we do it in our own crazy ways. Now, that plan says that Africa has to be peaceful and all of that stuff. And so because of that, transitional justice becomes one of the things that can be used to establish peace and security and stop marginalization and poverty. And so that is why it's also part of the foundation for this policy, right? The other one is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which is our own version of a human rights framework for Africa, right? And because it, again, it's a bit different, right? It's, you know, sometimes we do very nice things, like we say in Gambia, we make nice laws. So the African Charter also talks about human and people's rights. It's the only one that does deal with that. When it talks about peoples, different people in Africa, diversity, we need to make sure that everybody is treated equally, right? So because of that, again, it's a foundation for this policy, because it is again trying to promote equality. It is trying to remove marginalization, gender abuse, and all of that. So it's also a foundation for this policy. So nobody has questions. These principles I will not talk about much because somebody is going to present about them, right? But the last slide that I showed you, all of these foundations for the policy, right? The Constitutive Act of the African Union, the Agenda 2063, the African Charter. When you look at all of them, they have certain things in common. And if you look at African society in general, we have certain things in common. So the policy decided that if we are going to do transitional justice in Africa, we are going to make sure that it is based on these common values that we all have, right? And so because of that, if we are going to do transitional justice, it has to be African leadership has to be a value. One of the principles is that it has to be led by African leadership. That means the country, the continent, so the African Union, ECOWAS, or whoever it is, will have to be, those are the main decision makers, right? You cannot have the United Nations or Britain or America come and tell you this is how you should do your transitional justice. Now, that is the dream, but in Ethiopia, the reason why the whole obsession with accountability, and I told you about South Sudan, right? And the leaders, they are not wanting accountability, but the OHCHR, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, usually when it comes into these kinds of countries, it tells them that you must, accountability has to be part of it. We cannot allow impunity, right? So those who did the violations must be held accountable. Because of that, those countries then, there is no African leadership, it's UN leadership, right? And so this African leadership is just now an idea we have not fully achieved. There also has to be national and local ownership. So the country itself has to make its own decision because it knows its own problems, right? Inclusive, non-discrimination. Everybody in the country should be included in the process. African shared values, Ubuntu, that was what South Africa based their transitional justice on. Unity, we are all one. I am because of your philosophical stuff, right? But because of that, they believe that this is a principle that all Africans have. Like we are, we are sharing people, we like communities, we are family oriented, that sort of thing. So we have to bring these ideas into transitional justice. That is what it is saying, right? Restorative justice. So you find that in African communities, before this European legal system came, usually when somebody did something, the punishment is usually something within the community, and then once you do that, you are forgiven, right? And so they want to encourage those kinds of things to be included in transitional justice, right? Context specificity. So you have to make sure that whatever transitional justice you are doing is context specific. It's based on your problem. So you cannot have a genocide and you want to do what South Africa did, because it's going to be different, right? You cannot have a dictatorship and you want to do what Rwanda did. It's going to be different. So these I think I won't talk about much. I've given you this summary. You want more details, go look up the Agenda 2063. What they are telling you here is that aspiration 3, so you see dreams. Dream 3 talks about good governance, democracy, respect for, so they want transitional justice to provide this. Dream 4 is peace and security across Africa, right? And that also, you are laughing at me, but it's a dream. Aspirations are just dreams, and as long as you don't do anything to achieve it, it remains a dream. So that dream also wants peace and security in Africa, but of course, if people come out and you protest and you attack them and you beat them up, or if an opposition leader says something, you send them to jail, I wonder how peace and security is going to be achieved, right? And I think this is either the second to last or the last, right? So again, I've talked about this, the AU Act and why it decided to change from watching a genocide happen now to giving themselves the moral duty to intervene when there is a problem of this thing. So that's the last slide. Summary of what we are talking about here. Transitional justice in Africa has matured from externally imposed models. So we took it from the Europeans, set up a truth commission, set up a court. We changed from that to African-led frameworks. So we started to include, like Rwanda did, like Sierra Leone did, more African systems into the process. The AUTJP is a landmark achievement because it incorporates all the lessons learned from Africa and it puts it into one document. It recognizes our complex history, so it also tells us to, when we are dealing with transitional justice, think about how colonialism affected us, how slavery affected us. Now, let me bring it to the Gambia again. I need to say this. When we were doing our transitional justice, we gave the commission a mandate to look at 1994 to 2017, exactly. So we didn't go back, but I think some of the problems started even before independence. That led to Jawara, that led to the way Jawara decided to run the country, that led to the coup d'etat, that led to now, and that led to Barrow. So if you are looking at fixing your country, you have to go back to your history to be able to deal with that. And we did not do that. A lot of countries have not done that, right? It also recognizes our diversity. So one of the key principles or key elements of the African TJ policy is that if you want peace, you manage diversity. So if you have 64 ethnic groups, you have to think about how can I make all of these people live together without fighting. And Ethiopia has actually more ethnicities than Sudan, that has 64. I think they have 80 something in Ethiopia. So it's actually more complicated. So we are all going to see how the TJ process is going to happen. It's about to start, or it's in the process. It also highlights the need for transformative justice. Now, when we talk about transitional justice, it's just to change from bad to good. When we talk about transformative justice, it's to change the systems that allowed for oppression to happen. So transformative justice will mean that, for example, in Tunisia was the first country that tried to do transformative justice, is to make sure that youths get employment, because that was a systemic problem, that women no longer get abused and are allowed to participate in political life, that sort of thing. However, the policy is non-binding and its impact depends on the commitment of governments, on the African Union institutions, regional economic communities, civil society, and communities. So this thing is not a law, it's not a treaty, right? So it's up to governments to choose to apply it or not to apply it. And that is where the problem comes. Now they are talking about trying to make it into a treaty, actually, which I don't see how these people will accept. Presidents don't like things that will hold them to account in Africa, right? And it's always causing us problems. There is a thing called the Malabo Protocol, right? That was trying to add to the African court the power to try people for international crimes. So, for example, Gambia is trying to do, who knows about the SAM? SAM, Special Accountability Mechanism. Yeah. Somebody tell me something about it, please. No, you guys are the consistent ones. I mean the community that is here. Who can tell me anything about this Special Accountability Mechanism? Please. Anything? Who has never heard about the Special Accountability Mechanism? You have never heard about it? Okay. Who else? No, I am seriously asking. Please don't just chill. You have either heard about it or you haven't heard about it. Who have heard about the Special Accountability Mechanism? There has to be one or the other. You see, this is very, very, no, it's a serious thing. I'm not joking. This is a serious thing. You see, Gambia, even when we go to the international community, people engage and talk, and we just sit there like we can't speak. And that is going to affect our lives, our future, our country, everything. You know, it's really, really, really unfortunate that this is how we approach it. If you don't know, you speak about it. If you know, you speak about it. But you can't be, okay, I don't know it, but I also know it. It has to be one of those, right? This is the whole point of these things, right? Who here has heard about the Special Accountability Mechanism? Maybe you can ask it in Wolof also. No, there is a reason I'm asking it in English. Okay? I am writing a policy paper for Tango, right? And it's about the special accountability mechanism. And one of my arguments is that people don't even know or understand what it is. But now this is an opportunity for me to verify that, right? But everybody's totally quiet. Just the people that usually act in TJ are saying something. It's really, really, really unfortunate, right? Because you know what is going to happen. These things are going to happen. They are going to affect your life one way or another. And you will sit in some corner and you will complain that, no, they can be doing them, they can be. But when there are opportunities to discuss and talk about these things, because whatever you were going to tell me about this, I would have been able to incorporate in what I'm writing. We are going to say to government, look, you need to find a different name, or you need to explain this more clearly, or you need to make sure people know about it. But silence. It doesn't affect me much. So it's just basically advocacy and trying to improve things. Right? Sorry? Yes. See, but you didn't say anything.
I was trying to speak when you were explaining. So
yes. Yeah, yes, I apologize. You did raise your hand. So, part of the recommendations of the TRRC is that the government should set up or should prosecute Yaya Jammeh and all there are a number of people, 69 people were named in the TRRC report, that these people were the most accountable when they were doing human rights violation, and they should be prosecuted, right? Now, one of the problems that we had is that some of the crimes they committed cannot be prosecuted in the Gambian court, right? Torture was not a law in the Gambia when they were doing it. So we had to find a way to prosecute them. One of the ways to do that was to set up a court, a hybrid court, that is going to be part Gambian law, part international law. So the government decided to call it a special accountability mechanism. You see? And that is why I was asking, because that name is complicated. It's very difficult for people to even understand when you say what is the SAM, we call it, or special accountability mechanism. The government is proposing, right? The other thing is that when you set up these hybrid courts, they are very expensive. The Gambia has estimated, I think about, Flex is $63 million for the SAM. Yes. So this is what we are going to spend to set up this thing, right? That is one of the problems. And the reason why I was asking about the SAM is, of course, I was telling you that Africa has a court of human rights that can also try some of these cases if it is given the mandate, if it is given the power to do so. The only reason it cannot do that now is that it needs countries to accept or to give it that power. But the African countries, since 2015, all the presidents, only one country has ratified it. They need 15 ratifications to be able to start. If that was the case, if they had ratified that court to prosecute people, then Gambia would not need a special court, because the African Union would just get Jammeh wherever he is and just take him to that court, right? It would be so much less money spent than this. And that is the reason I was asking about that, right? But you guys also don't have an excuse, because we are not like the lay people that are sitting at home or cooking, or you people are active. You introduce yourselves here, all of you work in institutions, and you don't know about the SAM. There is no excuse for that, right? Huh? So you just don't want to talk. What's the point of knowing if you don't want to say something?
We actually, my organization is writing a small book on the SAM and the SPO.
Yes.
We are working on it.
So what is the point of you knowing if you don't?
No, we are saying yes, it's just so calm.
Did anybody here say yes?
No.
Exactly. And no, look, it's important to, you see, especially you are a woman, right? I'm sure would be one of the people who talk about the marginalization of women in this country. When you have an opportunity to speak and you don't speak, how can you complain that you are marginalized? Right? you have to be confident enough to speak out, especially in the position you are. You are working with an institution. That is a relevant institution. So your voice, speak out. It is important, right? Okay. So that's the end of my presentation. The last one is just that to succeed, the transitional justice must be participatory. It must deal with the context of the country. It must try to change the system from whatever it was to something better. It should be not only to build peace, but justice, to allow victims to be dignified, and also to unify future generations, right? So that's the presentation. If you have questions, I am happy to answer. Thank you. Well, I can sit. Any questions I need to deal with? Yes. Yes, sir.
During the presentation, you talked about some of the case stories in other countries in attaining some of transitional justice processes. Don't you think Gambia too is going the same procedure if you talk about transitional justice processes? Because in certain positions, you see the same people that are holding it and they should be held accountable. Don't you think it is affecting our transitional justice processes?
It is. So that is why I was talking about how difficult it is to do accountability. So it's always going to be that as long as there is a political interest, there is going to be that problem. In the Gambia, we have it. In the beginning of the TRRC, we did not have the problem. So everybody was really active. But that is why part of the policy, and somebody will present it, either myself or Councillor Lamin over there, but one of us will talk about the fact that sequencing, so how you arrange your transitional justice is important. Gambia, we did a TRRC starting 2019, and there was going to be a presidential election in 2021. And the moment it started to get that close, we were depending on the coalition. We thought it was perfect and everybody was happy in the beginning. And somebody had actually come to Gambia and warned us about it. I remember before the TRRC started, we were doing some trainings, and a lady from Ghana came to tell us that, you know, you people need to think about some of the challenges that will happen as you go along. But we said, no, we are all Gambians. You know how we like to say that, we are nice people, let's deal with this. And she told us, don't think that because things are all smooth now, it's going to remain like that, right? Something will change along the way. We didn't listen. But we started in 2019, and there was a presidential election in 2021, and because of that, the moment the coalition disintegrated and now the political actors wanted more support to win the election, Barrow decided to go and have a coalition with APRC. That was the starting of the challenges for accountability in this process. Because a lot of those people who were supposed to be accountable, during Jammeh's time, you had to be APRC to be part of the system. So most of the people were part of that party. And the moment they are there now, they have friends and they have colleagues and people they know, family members who are supposed to be held accountable. They don't want to have that happen, right? So that is where the problems come in. So we should have factored that. If we had the policy and it's telling us, look, consider sequencing. You have to think about when to do this, when to do that. We should have thought about that. But so it's a lesson learned for future countries that if they are doing these things, they need to know how to plan it so that the politics cannot, or this will not influence the situation. And that is, I think, the response to that.
Maybe what I want to add is, because after elections, always things will start at zero again.
Yes.
Because we are heading to 2026 election. Maybe the transitional process that we are doing, in case there is change of government or whether the regime is going to continue, certain things are going to start fresh, which is going to affect even agenda of African Union, that is agenda 2063.
Yes.
So, which is always difficult in attending some of these processes and all.
That is true. And that is why, again, if you look at the policy. So today we just deal with the introduction. The details of the policy we will deal with either later today or tomorrow, right? But you will find that it also advocates for having these measures to make sure that you consolidate, right? And part of the Gambian process, institutional reforms are important in this, what I'm trying to say, is that we had a constitution building process, and we had security sector reform, we had institutional reform. Those should go along with the transitional justice process, the Truth Commission and everything. In the Gambia, have you ever been involved in the security sector reform?
Yeah, I have attended some of trainings around security sector reform.
Yes. But how do you think now then, has the people participated in it like the TRRC? Yes. So it was not participatory. How did our constitution process, how did it go? Exactly. So you see, transitional justice is mostly a short-term, truth commissions. They are short-term. So whatever comes out of that should be entrenched in something that will take us long-term. The constitution would have been or should have been what will... So if you look at Tunisia, they developed a constitution. South Africa, they had an interim constitution, but they developed... So constitutions are these instruments that can ground these recommendations and findings to put them in a law that is going to be there long term. But we failed at doing that as well. So we don't have a constitution. If you look at the draft 2021 constitution, you find that it tried to address a lot of these issues that we are dealing with now, right? The powers of the president. Because if you look at a lot of the things that are going on, should I name names or should I just...
No, of course.
Okay, so there is an act, there is amendment to the Commission of Inquiry Act that allowed the president to basically forgive anybody that was found wanting by a Commission of Inquiry in the country, and it does not really give him any conditions. He can just, after 3 years, you write to him, Mr. President, I'm sorry, he takes you back, right? You are free, you can come back to the system. That would have been restricted in a constitutional framework that limited the powers of the president. We failed at doing that. That constitution allowed for public interest litigation that would have allowed any citizen to go to the court and file a case in a very simple way. You don't even need a legal expertise you'll draft your complaint, you'll take it to the Supreme Court, and they will look into whatever administrative issues is affecting a certain community, right? We have no constitution. We failed to bring that in. A whole lot of other reforms were included. We failed at that. So the constitutions and the laws are the things that will make a long-term protective measures. The only thing we can say for ourselves is that we passed the Prevention of Torture Act. That one has prevented torture in a very extensive way. Even if you give people stuff to drink, like Jammeh was doing with this witch hunt, it's constituting torture now. So that is one step. But we should have done that with all the other issues that you are talking about. Like otherwise, it's what you say. A new government comes, they decide what they want. Yeah. There is a country, I think it's Argentina, or it's not Colombia, it's Argentina. When they had their Truth Commission, the implementation, one government will come and prioritize accountability, and they'll realize that, oh, this is a problem. Then the other one will come and drop accountability and do reparations, and that will also not work. And that was a lesson that you have to do everything. So accountability cannot be left out. Reparations cannot be left out. Reconciliation cannot be left out. But it's what you say. As long as you don't have it in laws that are fixed, any government can change it. And that is the situation we are in. What can we do about it? That is the question. If you have any other questions, or is that the end of it?
So, another question. Basically, another question, like I was saying, I think will serve as, I might say, a clarification. When it comes to the definition, right?
Yes.
Is it just limited to countries that that went through conflict, or the countries, like example, our countries that experienced dictatorship, or that of like Senegal that did not experience a dictatorship, but then it went through some hardship, during their transition. So the definition, does it fit like these characters as well, or is it just?
So if you look at technical definitions of conflicts, it's more flexible than to say civil war or war. So it just says conflict. And conflict can sometimes be just mass protest and things like that. You can call it conflict within the definition and it would still fit. So they use these terms that are very flexible. So what Senegal had, for example, you can call it conflict, and if you feel like it's necessary to deal with that in a transitional justice setting, you can do that. But one of your measures will be whether it has affected the systemic. If you realize that, or if you feel that it's a systemic problem, then you deal with it. So Tunisia is one case. It was protest that led to transitional justice. There was no civil war. There was no conflict as in people fighting, shooting guns, right? And there was no, well, it was a kind of a dictatorship, but yes, their reasoning was that this is a systemic problem that is coming out, people protesting about different poverty, inequality, and they decided this requires a transitional justice process. So it just depends on the country and its context, which is why the policy keeps saying context specific, context specific. You have to look at your context. If you feel like it's necessary to have a TJ process, you go ahead and do TJ process. And that is why also it says that you don't have to do all of it. You just have to take out the things that you think are needed for your situation, and you do those. So if you think that Senegal, for example, only needed a truth commission, you just do a truth commission. If you feel like you need truth commission and reconciliation, you do that. So it's up to the country to decide how they do that. Yes. So anything else?
I just wanted to point out what he was saying, Big Kanyang, about the elections. I think it can also be an opportunity when it comes to us being key stakeholders, because we always talk about political will when it comes to the implementation. So I think when the election period is happening, that's when the politicians actually go for the rallies and things like that. So if we organize well, especially the victims, and make sure that the recommendations are part of the conversation when it comes to them talking about what to do and things like that, promises and stuff like that. So I'm just thinking that it's good. It can be an opportunity for us as key stakeholders in the transitional justice process to make sure that we inject that part of the conversation. So we talk about the recommendations, the implementation level, and TJ as a whole. Because as he said, if we don't address the past violations, there is no way the guarantee of non-reoccurrence.
Absolutely. So I'm told it's time, but the whole point is that whatever we are talking about, the policy is a tool for you to use to think about how you are going to participate in transitional justice. Whether you have an opportunity to advocacy, whether you have to take certain steps to prevent government from doing certain, it's up to you to think about what the policy is saying, its guidelines, it would use it in a different way from as a lawyer or from as a civil society actor. So it all depends on what your role is, what your job is, and then you can adapt it as you want. Thank you very much for listening. Okay. So.